3, 2, 1. Hi, I'm Angie.
And I'm Jamie.
Mental health is important.
And sometimes even the best therapists lose their shit.
Like the shit show. That
The
is...
shrink show. You pronounced it wrong. Tune on in and listen to Angie's shrink show of a life because I'm perfect.
Listen to our podcast, okay? You'll like it with therapists.
Coping skills. Hi, friends.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. We have an amazing guest today. Her name is Kathi McCarty. She is so amazing. She's an advocate who literally channeled her Erin Brockovich. She is here to educate us about meth and toxin awareness for our home and businesses. She ends up teaching us a lot about how, well, meth is probably in a lot of places that we didn't realize. And her incredible story is going to help educate and really push more awareness that we need to be having and questions that we need to be asking. So give her a listen, click on some of her links, and enjoy.
Enjoy her because she's a sweet soul, and honestly, her entire goal is to help protect our health and the future generations' health. So she's a good time.
And to make it so the home that you're living in is safe.
And you know what questions to ask. Empower your mind, and you'll know what to do. So listen to her and share her information with any and everyone that you know.
Ladies.
Kathi.
How are you?
I'm so sorry. I sent you an email at like 7:30 this morning with the Zoom link, and it just became a cluster, and I am so sorry.
It's all good. I've been drinking ever since. So
yes, you're nailing it.
I like your energy, that girl.
God, you know,
look at your nice mug.
You know, you talked about your stemware, your glassware. I felt the vibe. My daughter actually made this mug, so I use it.
Beautiful.
I use it for everything, and you know, she's grown up now, and so she made that design. And when she was in school in Montana, she went to undergraduate there in Bozeman. She's got the whole package, left, right brain kind of stuff. So she's very artistic. She did the pottery, she did the glaze, she etched it, and you know, this will be worth $1 gazillion someday. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, how old was she when she did that?
So let's see. I'm going to say she was around 22 or 23.
Nice. That looks great. That was wonderful.
It is. And you never know what's in it. That's the magic of it, right?
Yes. That's why we like the coffee mugs. People just think it's coffee.
Yeah, no. When you've navigated a few things that I've navigated, you learn to drink heavily sometimes.
Oh my God, I was just talking about that with a friend, right or wrong, but man, it does sometimes.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good. Anyway,
oh my God.
You two are a hoot. Can I just say that? Love you guys. Love your energy, and appreciate the chance to be here. Well, what can I share with you from a background perspective, other than I do keep my humor up at the time, through all this?
Honestly, Kathi, where I'm at is I just want to hear like your story. What made you so passionate about meth?
Right.
Meth.
I mean, and it's funny, but not funny, right? But it's kind of like that social work humor. When I was like 16 and off the rails and doing drugs and stuff, I always said, out of all the drugs I tried, meth was my favorite because it like opened my brain in a way that I had never unlocked before. And I had no idea the true dangers of it. I just had heard the stories of like chicken feed in the bathtub, right? But like, yeah, I watched your news story and your whole thing. Like I'm fascinated how buying a cabin in the woods and then having to move out for health reasons and having that cabin inhabited by meth makers somehow led you down this huge advocacy path of I'm gonna overturn this, laws and regulations. And I mean, I just love how people get to where they get. So
Yeah, and I grew up, when Erin Brockovich, Julia Roberts played Erin Brockovich, so I've been channeling my Julia ever since, and Erin. So, kidding aside, though, and I don't know if you want a backstory now before you go on to your
you do whatever
platform,
you want.
but I worked over 30 years in lending and banking. I was an affiliate from the ground floor of as an originator out of college to eventually an executive in the lending industry and banking industry, literally participated in thousands of closings, and was trained and provided training for the people that I served in the organizations that I worked for on and off for 3 decades, and never once ever even heard meth toxins was an issue in real estate. That's how I got started. And I'm like, how the fuck does that happen?
Right.
You take a property as collateral for a home loan. Let's start there. And there's all these checks and balances to make sure people qualify, and then that the home is a good decent piece of collateral for basic reasons. They don't make you do inspections. This is just sort of a it's just a practice, right? As opposed to a requirement. Appraisals help the lender, whether, and if you pay cash, you don't have to do any of it, or you can do all of it. But the bottom line is I went through this full adult career for over 3 decades and owned rentals, other property besides my own primary residences ever since my very first home in '88, and never once heard mentioned by any realtor, by any trainer, by anybody, period. And that's where I knew, when I'm standing on the deck of my cabin with the meth tester, that's where the inception of Meth Toxins Awareness Alliance came. I knew I had to just bring this awareness, this education, and this advocacy. And then when I went through my own process and I learned out how fucked up it really was, your insurances are void. The tenant had a policy, a renter's policy, but because he committed a crime, there's a clause in tenant policies that their policies are void because they had willful and wanton conduct. So this is stuff we can talk about, but I'm letting you know.
God.
So my insurance was not covered. I had to sue the management company who just raked me, spent a year and a half raking me through a process that even if I would have gotten $1 million judgment, they would have just appealed it and I'd still be fighting it today. It's really all about the money.
It's always about the money, Kathi. It's always about the fucking money.
So, yeah, and I, I'm not an angel, I'm human, but integrity and honesty are two of my top core values. And every turn in this process was so not in integrity. I just had to figure it out. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
God, that is so incredible. My husband's family does real estate a lot. And like, I'm not going to pretend like I know whatever the fuck I'm talking about, but, except for the fact that I do feel like, since you're in that world, don't you have to disclose if somebody died in the house?
Yeah.
Or if there's lead in the house?
Lead, mold, asbestos,
right? So
radon.
Yeah, all of those things impact your health and your mental health, right? Depending on your level of psychic ability or sensitivity, whatever. Now, meth, if I have children, let's say, Kathi, because I have a 2 or sorry, no, she's 2. No, she's 3. Shit, she just turned 3. Fuck. How old are my kids? I have a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 16-year-old.
God bless you.
I know, right? I don't know.
Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers.
I lost a dice roll along the way. But and 2 dogs and my grandma. Okay. Let's say I am like, I want to move to a cabin in the woods, and I buy your fucking cabin after it got repurposed. And I kind of, after you tell that story, I'd love for people to understand maybe the basis of this, because I'm jumping ahead, but like, what would be the impact of buying a meth house that I didn't know was a meth house?
Right. And that's the point of advocating for disclosure, because if and every state is different, and so I can only speak for Colorado, but in the state of Colorado, it's not required to be disclosed if it meets our state standards. And in my cabin, they never were able to clean it. So what they did is they followed a process called encapsulation, where they sealed the meth in with an approved product like a polyurethane, a clear coat, and they seal it in, and then they're able to sell it undisclosed. I mean, if I knew it was safe, I could have done that myself.
Right.
But everything I learned about the encapsulation process told me you're taking a huge risk, not only with yourself, because the whole reason I rented out my cabin is I had this very serious health occurrence myself in 2016. And then, like, to have my own family come visit once my kids were grown, have either my daughter or one of my daughter-in-laws come and be pregnant, and it can affect an unborn baby. Small children, our pets. You don't know. There's not enough data to know that there's no impact. They're just rolling the dice, and
because it's human data. Like we can't
it's not quantifiable yet.
Yeah, we can't put 7 pregnant women in a meth house and 7 pregnant women in a non-meth house and do a comparison.
You can't.
No.
Right, exactly. And so they're just saying, based off of what we know, these low levels are tolerable. They don't tolerate asbestos at all. You've got to eradicate the asbestos, cut it all out, and then you still have to disclose it. But with meth, at least in Colorado and the states that actually have some sort of standard, and I applaud all the states that do, but they allow for lower levels. They allow a level of meth to be okay. How is that okay? Let's just start there. They don't know. Like you said, they haven't killed enough rats yet, or it's all a crapshoot. And I had 7 remediation companies come to my home, and all 7 of them said, Miss McCarty, we're happy to try. Here's our quote. And I learned what those quotes meant too, but none of them thought they would be successful. And 2 of those companies gave me bids to demo it. And then I got a bid from a general contractor to rebuild it. And he gave me a bid to demo my place too. And now that place is standing. Somebody else is living in it, and they didn't have to sell it disclosed. They sold it 5 months after they bought it from me for almost $300,000 more, got all my equity, got my retirement home basically, and my security in my sacred space. And then they sold it undisclosed. And that's the law.
God, that angers me so much. And the reason, so because they don't know the effects yet, and yet is the operative word, lead poisoning, they now know can lead to basically kids having behavior disorders and requiring an IEP for learning disabilities. So working at a level 3 school with special education youth, I recognize how quickly society throws aside those kids, and it could be of no fault of their own. So it's like, how long do we have to wait, Kathi?
Well, thank you for recognizing all that. My sister is a SPED teacher over 30 years. So I'm sitting in her home right now while we talk. And I sit on the front lines of watching what she goes through all the time. And you don't know if these kids have behavior issues from like you said, lead, some other issue, could have been transferable in the womb, could have been from drug addiction or alcohol fetal syndrome from, a mother that just was abusing those substances, or maybe it was through secondary impact because, there was a family member that, consumed meth recreationally or through addiction in the property where they were living or staying in or visiting enough to cause problems. I mean, you just don't know. It's the web is huge, and it, sometimes my head hurts, but by all of it, but got to start somewhere. So now kind of where the ground roots of my passion came from. That was the long answer to that.
Oh man.
I just couldn't, crawl in a corner and move on with my life and just not say anything. I had to raise my hand.
When did you sell that house?
When? March of 2020. I'm sorry, April 4th of 2020.
Oh,
right,
shit.
right as the pandemic was starting. So, yeah. And so next week it'll be 3 years, and I'm here to say it's taken me this long to build the foundation, but to heal through this process. The PTSD, the health event that I was already navigating through, that I'm here to say I'm not sensationalizing it. It almost took my sight. So I was navigating that, and when my youngest went off to college, that's why I decided to rent my home temporarily to work on my next chapter. I wasn't whining in my beer, so to speak, that I had this health event. I was grateful that I didn't lose my sight. I drove yesterday, so I was nothing but grateful. But then when I when I rented out my home, thinking that it was a good temporary solution to just working on my next chapter, it turned out to be my worst nightmare.
And you lost
all of it. I have about $500,000 at a time. I'm 62, so I was gonna have that home paid off by the time I was 70, go into my retirement. My kids wouldn't have had to worry about mom because I wouldn't have had a mortgage payment, just the maintenance on the home. It was very modest. I sent you guys a picture of it, but it was towards the end, so I don't know if you saw it. It was a cute little 1,100 square foot cabin, 56 restored cabin. Yeah,
so cute.
and it had a nice little deck, and it looked to the west with a view of Mount Evans, which is one of our 14,000 feet, or one of our larger peaks. And so I had this sweet little view that I was going to leave as a legacy to my kids, my boys. My daughter probably wouldn't have wanted it. She never lived there because I bought it in 2013 after the first place I bought after their dad and I didn't make it. But that's all good. And we got 6 good years in it. Well, actually 26, 5.5 or so good years in it before I it was going to be a 1-year lease and I was going to be back in. So
So let's start from the beginning of the house and like paint a scene for listeners, because
sure.
we had the sneak preview of
I was giving you
your news story.
Some background. So
you're good. Paint a picture of because you said you got the house in 2013.
I got it in purchased it in this July of 2013. Officially closed on it. My daughter had already was old enough and had started college, and so my boys were teenagers at that time.
And then you lived there until 2016 when you had a health scare that almost took your sight.
Well, I had the health scare of 2016, but I didn't start renting it out right away. It was 2018 that this particular tenant moved in when my youngest was ready to go off to college. So this tenant moved in July of 2018. So I was still navigating the major impacts of my personal health issue that I had for a couple years before I even did that.
God, and the thing that I think infuriates me the most is, like you, I value integrity and I value honesty and authenticity. And it's like you have to have those moments where you trust people. And here you were trusting people that presented obviously a certain way, and over a 2-year span, well, I guess a year span, right? Because when did you even discover? How?
Oh,
I guess.
Yeah, how did you discover this?
Sure. This is the shocker. This all happened within 90 days of his tenancy.
Shut the front door. He destroyed your house in 90 days?
In less than 90 days.
Oh.
Okay, talk to us.
Yeah, what else did you find? What else did you see?
So how did that happen? How did I even end up discovering it within a 90 days of tenancy?
Right.
I truly believe our cabin was magical. I truly believe it called me home. I got a message from the property manager towards the end of September of 2018 that there was a water break at the house, a water line break at the house. It was mine, and they had somebody working on minor repairs. So that was great. That was a message I got. We talked during that evening then when we connected, and you know, I was even in town that day, literally in the community that I lived in, Evergreen, doing a little horse therapy at a friend's ranch close by. That being said, the next morning I got a text that said they're digging, and I'm like, "Who's digging? What are they digging?" I wasn't told there was any sort of digging going on, just that there was this kind of water line break, and there was plumbing behind the kitchen area that was outside the home, and I figured it was one of those outdoor pipes. I was told that it didn't even impact the tenant and the water usage. They didn't have to shut the water off for any major time, and it wasn't impacting the tenant. And so when I got that call about the digging, I tried to get a hold of the property manager, was unable to. Since I was staying at my sister's during that period of time, I hightailed it up from Denver. And when I got to the home, the driveway is on a slope. It's an incline, and it was about 100 feet long. There was at the top of the driveway, there was a huge excavator at the top of the driveway, like one of those big, huge pieces of equipment with the big shovel. And there was a 10-foot long by several foot wide by several foot deep hole in the driveway. Does that sound like a minor repair?
No.
No.
A management agreement normally requires, well, our management agreement had language in it that said that they were required to get approval for any repair above $300 through me, unless it was a safety issue and they couldn't get a hold of me. And so it cost well over $1,000 just to get a piece of equipment like that to show up at the bottom of your driveway.
Yeah.
So
Right.
nobody discussed that there was equipment being ordered. Nobody discussed that there was a big 10-foot long by several foot wide by several foot deep hole going on in my driveway.
Right.
It was all covered up. And I learned the reason why is because the property manager was there the day before. And when I went there and walked around the property, talking to the excavator about where they never found the water line. They should have asked me. I mean, I would have told them where they should have even started to dig. I mean, there's a meter, there's a water meter that comes up the side of the driveway, and they should have just started digging right at the end of the meter there and followed it to wherever they found a hole. That's secondary. But that being said, I walked around the back of the property, and that's not a large property, the backyard area, and there was equipment there that I could not identify. There was also a couple of propane tanks, small camping type propane tanks, like 3 or 5 gallon. There was a couple of 5-gallon buckets. There were these steel cylinders, these tall, thin steel cylinders that I could not identify. And there was hosing and things like that that I couldn't identify. I learned after taking those photos to the sheriff's substation, which, by the way, I could see their the sheriff cars through the trees at the top of my driveway. That's how close I live to law enforcement in this community. I'll have to send you that photo. Anyways, I learned that that was a THC extraction system. And so when I tried to call the property manager to say, "Have you seen what's behind the home?" I didn't get an answer. So I texted, and the response was, when I said, "Have you seen what's behind the house?" And the response was, "Is yeah, but we don't know what he's doing is illegal."
Oh, that's an
We also
interesting
don't.
word choice.
Pardon?
Interesting word choice.
Interesting word choice. And then I said, "Have you been inside the home?" And the response was yes. And I said, "Do you have any pictures?" And the response was yes. I asked for those pictures to be sent to me, and I was truly shocked. And there there weren't any pictures of the it's a small, modest 3-bedroom cabin, but there were no pictures of the boys' bedrooms. And so I asked immediately. I texted back and said, "Is there are they growing pot in the bedrooms?" And the answer was no. That the bedrooms were actually in decent shape, but the pictures that I got from the inside of the home were completely shocking on how this guy lived for 90 days. And then the materials, I did eventually get a picture of one of the boys' bedrooms, and on the dresser there was a huge, highly explosive, highly dangerous butane oven that was used to process in some fashion THC products, cook them, and things like that. It was separate from the meth. But when I took these pictures to the local sheriff's substation, and they called our drug task force in West Metro Denver, the they got a search warrant from my pictures, from the pictures that I provided, and within a couple days, it took a couple days to process and get the search warrant, and that's when they served it. And they found the meth lab inside, or all the hardware makings in a little cabinet. They found over 800 grams of meth. They found tons of other there was plenty of other drugs. There was a stand-up freezer in the dining room area that was, I think, packed with pot, if I remember. There was heroin tablets, there was ketamine, there was mushrooms, there was hash, THC, high potency THC products. I don't remember what there was. But he was arrested on 12 felony counts. There was a small arsenal of very dangerous guns, and there were surveillance cameras. All this stuff was all set up, and he was arrested on 12 felony counts for what he was doing in my home. And he was looking at up to 32 years based off those 12 felony counts. And the property manager was there the day before, saw a lot of what was more than unconventional, right? Just that should have been very alarming, and did absolutely nothing about it until it was discovered that I knew what was going on.
So if you're, I don't have rental properties. So if you're the owner of the house, so the property manager, basically you're kind of contracting, if I understand correctly. Are you like contracting with that person to help you in your absence to look after the property and make sure that the tenant is behaving in accordance, and that your house is being taken care of, and any kind of major needs they are there to address?
Yes, there is. We had many conversations about what a property manager in that capacity would be doing for me. But what I learned in this process is there is no formal standard of care. It's not a law. We just kind of assume that they're gonna market the property, they're gonna do the leasing agreement, the legal document, which is between them and the tenant. I have a management agreement with them and the property manager, but then the property management company and then the tenant have a different agreement, right? And we verbally had conversations because of my lending and banking background of well over 3 decades. I mean, I knew how to qualify a tenant, and I had been a tenant before, even in my career, when post marriage for a period of time. So I went through the process of being a tenant, and we had very thorough discussions about what they were going to look for, and then who the person was that they were putting in the property, and how they had vetted this person. And it turned out, when I asked for the vetted file, when I fired them to then move forward with some sort of legal process where I had to evict the tenant, there was no file. There wasn't even a credit report that they had pulled.
Oh my
Yet
God.
I was fully assured that they were a highly qualified business owner in the entertainment industry. And it turned out that this particular individual, although I'm not here to bash any particular industry, he did not own a company in the entertainment industry where there was any documentation about that. He worked at one of the Denver strip clubs.
Well, no, he was very highly,
But he didn't
qualified.
own it. He didn't own it. I don't care if that was his, if that was his commodity. But I talked about things like, well, if the guy is self-employed and he's out snowboarding, for a weekend when friends come to visit, and he breaks his leg, does he have enough money to go not be in work for 6 months if he ends up breaking a leg and he can't go to work? I mean, I
Right.
asked for all these things that were well above and beyond the scope of what an average property owner might need to know to vet a tenant.
Okay, so
And
that
I was
makes
a,
me think the property owner knew.
well, we found smoke, but because of the circumstances of this very unique, very complicated situation, we never were able to find the smoking gun, because in his criminal process, I was also following through on a civil process, but he fled his criminal trial, and we never were able to depose him to learn whether, in exchange for an opportunity to plea bargain with the DA's office, whether he was willing to implicate anybody else in this process. But I know, based off of the behavior of somebody, either they were covering for themselves and or somebody else they knew, or they knew something, but at minimum, it's like, oops, we screwed up. Did they get paid off to look the other way? I have no idea, and we never could prove it,
Oh,
because
Kathy, this shit goes so fucking
it
high.
it
You
goes
know
deep.
it.
It goes deep. It goes so deep.
I
And
mean, seriously, it's probably fucking governmental run or some bullshit. I mean, I hate that that's the reality, but god damn it. Like there's so many things that don't sit right inside of my body right now that
mhm,
tell me
yeah.
that there's so much wrongdoing.
Now you know why I just had to raise my hand and talk about this publicly. As hard as it has been, it's taken me over 4 years to get to this point of healing on so many levels.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Because as mental, and I keep
Right?
interrupting Jamie because I'm just
No.
so eager, but and I want to let Jamie ask whatever questions she needs to ask, but only when I'm done.
I know my place.
No, but I'd love, because we like to talk about, holistically the mental health experience that we all are having. And, I not wanting to put words in your mouth and attributing certain feelings. But you did mention, PTSD and having to work through the mental health, and just kind of what that process looked like for your healing mentally and physically, if that is a part of it, but mainly mentally, in that kind of betrayal, I suppose.
Right. There's so many layers of this, Angie, that I wouldn't even kind of know where to start. And I'm still healing, but I'm getting the most leverage from my healing, from the results that are happening that are helping others. That this ultimately, that I'm grateful when I look at the photos and I share this information with you, as to what was going on in my home. It was very dangerous. The equipment was highly explosive. We had just gotten out of a phase 2 fire ban in our community. This property was in the trees. I live in the foothill forest west of Denver in Evergreen, Colorado, and there was explosive equipment that had had anything happen, even in the backyard, even with this extraction system, it could have been just so catastrophic for my neighbors and my whole community. And I'm just, first and foremost, I must tell you that I'm so grateful that nobody was hurt, nobody's property was impacted other than mine in this process, and that our community was safe. And this all happened a month before Paradise, California, had it for very different reasons. 90% of that community burned down, and the people that I was working with here in Colorado compared what could have happened to what did happen in Paradise. So that's where I want to really emphasize is the gratitude. That being said, um, I really learned how dangerous it was for somebody like that I was engaging with in at the property for a few days before we discovered all this, and to learn about the arsenal of guns that he had, the other people we had on the property. I had an excavator, I had a couple of plumbing experts. There were several of us on the property at one time, and this guy could have felt truly threatened, and it I'm not here to sensationalize anything, but I'm just grateful that nobody was hurt.
Mhm.
That being said, it's a very stressful situation. And the reason why I rented out my home to begin with is because I was diagnosed in early 2016 with an autoimmune disease called Graves' disease. And I didn't know even that I had that until I was experiencing issues with my thyroid that ultimately Graves' disease attacked my thyroid, and then the thyroid started to attack the orbital area, the tissue and muscles in my eyes, and I was losing my sight. It's called TEDS, thyroid eye disease.
Hmm.
And so all of a sudden, I found myself post surgeries. I did have 4 surgeries and things like that, and went through some healing. And that's where I was kind of ready to go to my next chapter with significant damage to my eyes, so to speak, or the optic nerve parts of my eyes. Obviously, all that was stressful, and all that stuff I was dealing with exasperated what I was already experiencing and trying to heal from. I was also limited in my capacity on what I could do to research all this. So I was climbing 100 huge hurdles, especially in the first 100 days, to learn about meth, learn about what it can do. How do I find people that can help me navigate this shit show and figure out where to go and how to do it with limited capacity in my sight, and it wasn't, it was, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It sucked. It was hard, but I did find people that could help walk me through these steps. They take time. I tried to get whole through the civil legal process, and of course, with the management company, who I believed violated their fiduciary responsibility to me and their neglect and misconduct to cover it up, even if they didn't know that individual initially. They certainly didn't raise their hand and say, "Ruh-roh, we screwed up. We got to, we got to do something about this as a team." They Their insurance carrier, all they did was step in and say, well, it didn't matter that what we didn't do. It wouldn't have made any difference. We would have never known the guy was cooking meth, would have cooked meth or anything. There was nothing in his history. And so it was just a
There's
very,
nothing in his history because you never got his history.
well, once they looked at it afterwards and pulled a credit report, even if I looked at when I looked at his credit report after the fact, I would, as an individual, he was not a highly qualified business owner in the entertainment industry. He was fully margined on all his credit cards, and yet he didn't have any lates. And but there was no income documentation or anything to support what he did. He didn't have any criminal background that he was arrested for meth, but they had 2 other applicants that had qualified, that could have been better applicants that may never have done what he did. So my point is I'll never know if there was any hocus pocus and shenanigans that went on to put him there that benefited, anybody within that decision making process.
I love how
But
sometimes shit like this, like you're not fucking liable when you very, very obviously didn't check, cross your T's or dot your I's. Like you're not liable. But, if I'm a goddamn 17-year-old and I happen to be in the car with somebody who kills somebody, I'm on the hook for, the murder just as much as they are. Even if I could say, well, I had no idea they were going to do that. I just happened to be in the car with them. But that's not an argument. Yet this fucking bullshit is an argument. Like, I'm sorry, but it pisses me off that they can just go about their day, fucking shake their hands, and continue to have their sleazy ass fucking business doing the same thing to other people who might not have the wherewithal to have gone and checked, which you did, even in the midst of your health stuff.
Oh, I asked all the right questions. I put all the right protections in place. I had a policy, I had an endorsement on my homeowner's policy to have a tenant there. I had conversations with the property manager about having, it's right there in the lease where that guy was supposed to have a $300,000 policy on my property, and which they just his policy owner policy carrier declined, because in the fine print of those policies, if you commit a crime, your conduct is willful and wanton, and their policy's void. But even before all that, the policy was supposed to be for 300, and we got a copy of it. It was for 100. They never even verified that they got the amount that they put in their own lease. So let's just start there. But that's, as bad as that is, and as unethical as it seems, it's not a crime. And so you have to go through the civil process. And what you have is a multi-billion-dollar insurance company cross-suing me for a fraudulent, even though they didn't do their job, that doesn't, this is a bullshit lawsuit and so I've got to write checks every month, thousands of dollars, not only for my mortgage to keep my credit intact. You got to, you made a promise to pay, so you have to pay your mortgage and keep your taxes and everything going, right? Keep the heat on so your pipes don't burst in the winter, because this went on for a couple of winters. And then all they do is they drag it on, and if you get a judgment, they're just going to turn around and appeal it and drag it on even more. I'd probably still be in appeals court, literally wiping me out financially just to pay the people to help me fight the good fight.
God, I think you said it best at the very beginning when you said it's all about the money. Mm-hmm. It's always, all you have to do in every scenario to find out who truly has the power or who truly stands to gain from these fucked up situations. It's always about the money. So this meth guy, whether he knows the property managers or not, he can pay them a good lump sum to have them look the other way, give him this hidden property in the woods that he can establish his fucking business. The insurance company doesn't stand to gain by insuring it for $300,000. Oh, we're just going to do it for $100,000. And then, fuck you, Kathi. Fuck you for not doing, your checks and balances, even though you did. But it's like, oh my God, can you just tell me your emotional process through all of this? Because I know what mine would be. Are you throwing tables or not?
Privately, I was throwing tables. I really tried to keep it together. I did believe the system would ultimately do the right thing by me. And 18 months later, I tapped out for pennies on the dollar in a mediated settlement that left me houseless, because in the 18 months that I was fighting the good fight, real estate in our area just shot up, and I was already on disability income. I didn't have my big girl job at, as a VP at the bank anymore. I was on disability income on a policy that I purchased and carried for 10 years. I'm really glad I did, because I was able to stay afloat. But I was never able to then replace what I had. All I asked them to do is buy the house back from me and cut me loose so I could go buy an equivalent home, and they wouldn't do that. They're like, what we'll do is we'll remediate the home enough to put drywall in all around the house in the inside. We'll drywall it in, because this was a log home. I bought a log home. I wanted the log charm. If I wanted a home with drywall, I would have bought a home with drywall. But that was their solution. And then that doesn't mean it's not in the it gets into the nooks and the crannies, and it's in the ventilation system. So even if you drywall it around the wood, it's still going to get through in the air. And so they were willing, to compromise my health, obviously. And what did the future mean? Because if someday either I had to sell it in order to take care of me in my old age, let's say I couldn't just die there like I had hoped someday, and pass it on to my kids as my legacy. What happens if I sold it and then it was testing hot down the road? There's no guarantees. There's no perfect process. It's the testing I've learned is it's a 4-inch square on the wall, on 4 different walls or whatever, and there's a lot of surface area. So just because they clean one area doesn't mean it's going to pass in another area. And so these are some of the processes we're working on right now with legislation, but it's only a start and a tip of the iceberg, because the science is not quantifiable yet. Like we were talking about earlier, it's going to take a lot of years to track real results.
It's so not person-centered, Kathi, and
It's not.
Jamie and I, having been in this system for 20 plus years, and then me even seeing it with loved ones, it's rarely is the help or the advancement person-centered, right? And it's extremely frustrating. And so I oftentimes see folks in your situation where tragedy has struck you in a major way, and here you are rising up, being the voice for the voiceless, for the ones that may not know, and protecting the next generation. So you kind of mentioned the legislative advancements that you're trying to make. Can you speak more to what those look like?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And
obviously, I don't want to get you in trouble or anything.
No, there's nothing to be discreet or be quiet about, in that respect. And I apologize if I didn't even answer the health piece, because I had no real process. I mean, it was, I just hung on at times, and other times, my family and my dearest friends just carried me through these really tough times where I seeked out joy in spite of my circumstances, and just really try to do the things that brought me some sort of fun and gratitude. And I'm in nature. Nature is nurture. So that's possibly how I got through some of that. But that being said, to answer your question about the legislation, only about half our states have any regulation or laws around meth contamination. The other half don't even have anything. And I'm here to say it doesn't matter if your state doesn't have it or it does. Meth is happening everywhere. That's what I've learned. And when we're talking about is meth consumed by smoking it. When I grew up, I'm a baby boomer. It wasn't smoked as much as it is now. And it's also manufactured, but manufacturing isn't as common. But because of the what it's made from, petroleums and things like that it's made from, it leaves a sticky residue that has no half-life. It doesn't dissipate. So if you bought a place and then you painted it and there was meth there, you encapsulated it and it could work its way through like lead does, through paint. and asbestos and other things. And with asbestos, you have to break into it for it to be released, that type of thing. So it's the same. And so to answer your question about meth is, here in Colorado, we have a bill that's introduced to at least, there's a database that our health department has been tracking for over a decade now, I believe, on properties that do, including mine, that are in a database register of properties that have tested above the state standard, but it's not public facing. So people don't know about it. I didn't know about it until my attorney told me about it. And then you can Google it, but it's really still hard to find. You got to be very precise. And then you could see a property that may have had previous contamination in it. But then it was remediated to the state standards, so it's been cleared. So in a real estate transaction, they don't have to disclose it like they would previous mold or previous asbestos or some other toxic contamination. It's treated like a dead body. Well, if somebody passed away in the home, that's tragic. Could be even a worse emotional situation if it was through, very suspect reasons, right? But
Really quick, Kathy, I do want to
mhm.
know, like, what specifically would people need to search for?
Search for in the way of for meth.
Yeah.
Well, my home, once he moved out, you couldn't tell. There wasn't anything to search for, but there are some signs that you can look for. But because there's no geographical socioeconomic or geographical stigmatizations anymore like there used to be. It used to be low income, high crime areas. You'd look for needles, you'd look for beakers, you'd look for foilies where drugs may have been used or straws, things like that. My house didn't present as a drug house at all once he moved his shit out. Um, and if I hadn't discovered that equipment, he might have been there for a year, moved out, had somebody come clean it, and then I would have moved in and realized that my eyes were burned so bad that I couldn't even stand there for a minute. So, but what do people look for? There are common household products that if you see them hanging around that might be in there, like the Sudafeds and the ephedrins and things like that. I built a whole course on this, just so you know. I don't know if you caught that in any of the news pieces, but I've got it accredited through our regulatory agency out here to teach it to professionals for CE credits, but it should be turned on for individuals as well. But to answer your question, there's all sorts of things you can look for as far as manufacturing, like scarring on the walls and just the type of pieces of glass equipment that they might have, and hoses and things like that, remnants. But household products like Drano and battery. They strip the batteries for the lithium materials and things like that. You may or may not find some of that. So
Do they still
my
use chicken feed? Because I remember, again, as a teenager, it was like chicken feed, Drano, bathtub. Like those are the
Drano.
things I remembered.
Well, they're doing other things now, but here's the other thing: the meth today is so much stronger than even what maybe this guy was making coming out of Mexico, cheaper, stronger, through the drug cartels. So as much as manufacturing is out there, or at least the remnants and the residue from maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago even or more, it's really the usage. Meth usage is at epidemic levels, whether it's recreational or through addiction. It's in our cars. People came to Colorado when they made pot legal, cannabis legal, and they come to party and they rent a car. And, before they go into the clubs or the music places or whatever, they might light a bowl and who knows what's in it, or a little bit of everything's in it. So I'm just here to say the residue, when they blow it out, that's what sticks with the meth. And the cars now that they're getting stolen and they're testing for meth, they're totaling them because they know they can't get them cleaned. So I'm just here to say, after all of this, no matter what you do, no matter where you are, find a way to test for meth before you buy, because even if you found out that that home had been remediated to the state standard, or if there is no state standard, it still was remediated, it doesn't mean it's gone. And once you own that property, it's a bitch to get to get whole on it, because if somebody else comes to buy that after you own it or you have to clean it, it could bankrupt you.
Are there programs or services that help people pay? Because I mean, obviously I'm a social worker, and I know social workers and teachers. So it's not like we're having money coming out of our wazoo like meth dealers. So are there programs or, state or federal that we can utilize? Because you put all of your money, all of your eggs into the basket of paying for your deposit, if you're even, smart enough, savvy enough to do that. What can people use to pay? Or how much does that cost if they don't have the services?
Well, and if I understand your question, how much does what cost? Just to test? Or and it varies from state to state and how big your property is. But you can buy these little test kits. I'll compare them to like a pregnancy test where, you do one swab somewhere and it,
Can you buy those at the Dollar Tree? Because that's where I bought my pregnancy tests.
Right. Well, you can't buy those at the Dollar Tree, but there are companies that'll sell them online to you, but some are better than others. And I'm not here to endorse any companies, but I am here just to say, we could spend hours talking about this, and I realize we have a little bit, a limited amount of time, but to answer your question, there aren't any organizations or agencies set up to help you with meth. I mean, if there was a major flood, you could go to FEMA, right, and maybe get no interest loans and things like that to rebuild and all that kind of stuff. There's no FEMA for meth, and I never found anybody that would, short of I didn't do a GoFundMe for me or any of that kind of stuff in that respect. So no, unless you go to your local churches and some of your local organizations when disaster strikes, whether it's for temporary housing. This is a public platform because I'm going to say if you're a short-term hotel motel type of franchise and you want to offer short-term housing like a small mini suite or a room for somebody impacted that needs a place to stay for a week or two when all of a sudden they find out they have to move out and all their shit's going to go into the dumpsters like mine did. Please call me because I'd love to hook you up like an extended stay or something, or a Marriott or any of them, Hampton Inn, you name it. But that being said, there are none. You're going to have to go to your local agencies and start knocking on doors and asking family and friends to put you up. And it's hard.
Does this go back to just because we don't know the effects of how this truly is impacting people? Why no programs like this exist?
That is a good question. I'd have to say our social service or social organizations or social service systems are so overtaxed to begin with. There's so much that they're helping with. The mental health crisis alone is, it's taxing our systems beyond the coffers that we have. Our budgets are, skinny to non-existent, whatever's left. And I don't know if you guys read about what's going on in here in Colorado, and why we're getting a little bit more traction is because 7 of our libraries here in Colorado tested positive for meth. I don't know if you guys had heard that. And it all started in Boulder where, right, our libraries, our sacred libraries that are supposed to be for education and research and community and family. And
where I take my kids for fun. Great.
You take your kids for fun. And
how the fuck does that happen, Kathi?
Well, it happened. It started in Boulder, Colorado, because a couple of, I believe, employees went into the bathroom and, they got a little lightheaded, this and that. And that particular library is right in an area where there are a lot of homeless, and it's a public facility. So the doors are open for all the right reasons, and all the bad things tend to happen. And so there was a lot of meth use going on in that area. And so they tested it, and through an abundance of caution, other other local libraries did test, and we had 4 in our Colorado Front Range here, and then in Colorado Springs, about an hour and a half south of Denver, one of their libraries tested hot, and then another hour further south in Pueblo. But I guarantee you can, it's in a lot of our public facilities. We're just not talking about it.
We just don't know,
They don't
right?
have they don't want to test it because then they have to deal with it. It's like, don't ask, don't tell.
Well, but they don't
Right.
even have to necessarily deal with it, Kathi, because let's be honest, I feel like a lot of people probably really do know about a lot of this. They just don't share that information.
Right. And it's a short-term exposure. You go into a public facility, you go out, you're not there for a long time. Yes, your kids go in there, and if they've been temporarily exposed to meth,
fuck them, fuck the children.
It's like, it's like they get amped up. It's like they've experienced it themselves. But, meth is being mixed with fentanyl now, and a few grams is a killer. I mean, we can't ignore this kind of behavior, and where does it start? How do you even tackle it? It's beyond my pay grade, and I know it, but I got to start somewhere. So,
you know what? Can I just say, Kathi, I don't wish ill will upon anyone. However, what?
But
there is no, well, I guess it's not a but. And I don't wish ill will upon anyone, except for the people who are, really high up, and the ones who are actually the puppet masters controlling all of this bullshit and making us fucking think that we're, whatever. I'm out of it. But I have to say, when people have experienced trials and tribulations like you, and they take it and they come out of it with gratitude, and they come out of it to educate and to advocate and to be the voice for the voiceless, it's just, it does something within me that reminds me of how beautiful the human race truly can be, in spite of all of the negativity that we see. It's like you can be triumphant, and you can make a difference, and you can take tragedy and turn it into absolute beauty. It's you were a caterpillar, and now you're a fucking gorgeous butterfly just flying around, spreading the word of meth and the dangers.
Right. Who would have thought that would have been my 4-letter word, right? It's not, it's sometimes, I know what you're saying, and I thank you for that. I'm just trying to handle it with as much grace and gratitude, and a lot of gratitude and some grit along the way. It's not easy, but I do believe that I've been given this almost, it's hard for me to say sometimes, but then I know it in my heart. My cabin was magical. It called me home for a reason. A lot of people, I believe, were saved in that process in my community. And I feel, based off the knowledge I have from my previous career, my life, it wasn't just a career, it was a lifestyle for me and a livelihood that I enjoyed so much. I learned things that I just knew this needed to get a larger voice for good. And hopefully with some of this education, it'll continue to have that ripple effect. And it'll ultimately, it's the responsibility I needed to leave with my children, that I've been blessed along the way for, as tough as life gets sometimes. I'm very blessed, and it's what is handed to you. It's how you deal with it, but to leave a legacy in with a better than the way I found it then. And that's what I'm hoping some of this education and legislation will absolutely do. So my children and my grandchildren and beyond could have a little bit of a more awareness, and at least not have meth bite them in the ass.
We had a speaker not too long ago, a guest, and she had said, you can be grateful for what you experienced while also acknowledging that it wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And I loved that so much, because it gives permission to say I'm grateful for the pain because it taught me, but it also wasn't okay what happened to me.
No.
And it's not going to be okay moving forward. But here you were wanting to just leave a legacy for your children in a property, and yet you're leaving a legacy for a generation. I mean, you've fucking upgraded. Look at you. You're a badass.
Well, thank you. And I thank you for that. I'll just leave it at that. I also believe karma's a fucking bitch.
It sure is.
She's a sassy little bitch. Yeah.
And so I just know what comes around goes around. And that guy, he fled his criminal trial. I wanted to just wrap up a little bit and let you know the partial happy ending on that. He got pulled over in one of our suburban communities 18 months later on a traffic stop. And so he spent 6 months, the next 6 months from June of 2021 till December, going through the criminal trial process, which once I learned he was reincarcerated, I followed and attended all of his criminal hearings, and ultimately he pleaded out on one felony count instead of 12. He pleaded out on one felony count and got 10 years. Who knows, how little time he'll serve, but that started, that sentencing was December of 2021. So, he's at least, who knows how many properties he contaminated in that time he was on the run, which is why I always encourage people to test for meth, no matter what. No matter how nice that $2 million home looks, I'm here to tell you, even in our community, a $2+ million home turned out contaminated with meth, big time. So that being said, he is serving his sentence. I went through the civil process with him and the management company. I have a huge judgment. Don't know how I would ever get whole on something like that, through him. But, we'll just, I don't, that's where it becomes an illusion of protection. The insurance industry and our judicial process, at least our civil, can be illusions of protection because we think we put all those right pieces in there. But I missed the fine print somewhere that criminal activity is not covered by your tenant's policy, and there are toxins and other, including meth and other exclusions in our own homeowner's policy that will not cover us unless when you're on vacation, somebody breaks in and then does meth in your home and you can prove it while you were gone, that's when it happened. And you can prove that you had it tested before that happened, because they'll just say, well, how do you know it wasn't already contaminated? Did you ever test it before? Because that's what they did to me. So I'm giving you some tips along the way that if people want more information, I'll eventually get this type of course out to the general public and they can learn more to protect themselves. So
I had shared the company that you founded, right? Meth Toxins Awareness Alliance. You said that you offer CE programs and you do share what else that your company does for the world.
Sure. It's, as far as the continuing education classes, it's approved through our Colorado regulatory department under the Division of Real Estate so far. So that encompasses the real estate community as well as property managers. That's where I started. And I'm in the process of expanding that to the lending communities because through the NMLS system, and hopefully that'll be CE accredited, and then branching out to other states. I would hope that one day in my lifetime, we could have a federal mandate of some sort of requirement of disclosure of meth contamination. I'm not even there yet in the state of Colorado, but I hope to intend to get there maybe by the next general session next year or the year after, putting all those right people and things in place. So just go to Meth Toxins Awareness Alliance, reach out to me. I continue to grow with the amount of people and that are willing to help in many different industries and areas of expertise. And we welcome more that would like to participate.
I nominate the Stevens Real Estate people. They don't even know this, but I'm nominating them. I'm nominating my family, my husband's family's real estate.
Great.
Be part of this.
Let's talk offline on this, and let's get them on a Zoom and let them get educated a little bit on what we're talking about, whether they get credit or not. What state is that particular agency? It's
Nebraska.
where? Nebraska. Okay, well, you're right next door, and yeah, I mean, look up. Well, yeah.
I did try looking it up briefly while also trying to listen. I don't multitask overly well, so I couldn't figure it out.
Right. I know I joke around, but State Farm has a couple of really good memes out there, and one is that I'll have to send you guys pictures of, and you can use. One of them is the shed is on fire, and they say everybody knows, Cheryl, that the she shed was a meth lab, and then there's another one where, what is it, Jason, who's the guy that
Jake from State Farm.
Jake from State Farm, and he's like, "What are you wearing?" And he's in a hazmat suit, and
I love how the meth humor is similar to like social work and therapy humor. It's like that super dark. We have to laugh about the awful things in life in order to survive.
Well, we turned meth into a thing of entertainment. I mean, it got a lot of good publicity and a lot of good press with Breaking Bad. And I can't tell you how many people I know just absolutely love that series. And so Hollywood sensationalizes these things through that. And there's some other series that I know they had characters and have characters that are way into the meth thing. And so people don't realize that the residue that it leaves is really a bad thing. And I would just like to see somebody like Maria Van Zeller, who goes to those cartel places in the deep jungles and whatever, but to do something about, that she shows people doing meth and smoking it and all that kind of stuff, but bringing that national presence to the toxins that it causes, and would be a really good public service as well. It may not sell as much airtime, but or commercial time, but I think it's definitely worth having that conversation.
On a side note, Kathi, again, working at a behavioral school for kids that are struggling with trauma and special education, I can't tell you how many of them the story is they're a meth baby.
Yeah.
So that alone shows you the impact. I mean, obviously using substances when you're pregnant, but it's always they're a meth baby, they're a meth baby, they're a meth baby. It's a continuous story. We don't have to recreate the wheel to see that there's a fucking problem with meth. Just like the same thing with smoking cigarettes. You can't smoke cigarettes when you're pregnant and not have it impact your baby or impact the baby's well-being.
Right.
So maybe that's the key, is finding all of those kids with behavioral problems and trauma and issues and linking that back to meth, because there's so fucking many. I mean, there's just so many.
There's too many.
There's way too many. Way too many. Anyway, Kathi, you've been incredible. You've been incredible. And I don't know if Jamie grabbed a mug.
I grabbed a mug.
Grabbed a mug. And Kathi, I want you to share your mug, because I know you kind of shared it at the beginning, but just in case that gets, I'm not sure.
See the horses?
Beautiful horses, and your daughter made that mug.
Yeah. So that this is my favorite mug, because it just reminds me and speaks to all of it right here. The love of family and just the beauty of it all. So, and I know where this came from. I mean, I got to go to the actual pottery studio and way up outside of Bozeman and watch where it all happened. So,
and it's not infected with meth.
And I know it's not infected with meth. Cheers, lady. Cheers, ladies.
Great.
It's been an absolute honor and a delight to be here. You're so adorable. I look forward to just kind of keeping in touch with you guys, and
Yes.
and whatever this is, and however you edit it, taking it and getting it out there to spread the love, and the word and the love that you share, in everything you're doing. It's just been a delight.
Kathi, you're beautiful people.
You're so sweet.
Right back at you.
Aw.
When you change everything in Colorado and then move over next door and start working on Nebraska, yeah, we'll be fighting the fight with you.
That sounds great. And I knew you were in Nebraska. I just didn't know if that's where your husband's real estate business was. So it's local there. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, my husband and his family, they all but one brother lives here. So yep, they're all here. They're all here.
So how far away from Scotts Bluff are you?
Very
far.
Okay.
You're in Omaha.
You're in Omaha. Well, yeah. So I've been to Omaha before, and it was lovely, and but no city is immune. So we'll talk about that a little bit more.
So my mug says it's Garfield, and it says I don't do perky, which I think is funny because he's obviously not on meth.
Right. Or caffeine.
Thank God. He's only on lasagna.
And Jamie, how about yours?
Here's mine. Certified coffee addict.
Yeah, nice. Very nice.
I don't do meth.
No.
But I do drink a lot of coffee.
What is
your gin and tonic?
Well, I was going to say, what is your preferred coffee of choice?
Black coffee.
Black.
Gin and tonic.
With some gin and tonic. No. Okay. But my preferred coffee is just plain black coffee. Otherwise, it's gin and tonic.
Good to know. Good to
know.
Drinks,
2 beverages. That's all I drink.
For a long time, my attorney and I, for a good portion of a couple of years, when we would get together, we did tequila, and we were either toasting to the good guys, as we called it, or there was a reason to have a shot for something that just didn't go our way for whatever reason, a setback, a delay, or whatever. And so I learned to enjoy. Can't have all the sugar, so no margaritas, just go straight to tequila.
Tequila, that a girl.
Chase it with a good cold beer.
Well, we're gonna say goodbye to our audience, but we thank you so much for listening to Kathi's story, giving her space to share her experiences, and also just educating the world on the dangers that are out there and helping us be better prepared for, our
questions to ask and what fine print to read.
Yeah, because I mean, fuck. Who would know like that these things aren't gonna cover, I can't even tell you how many agreements where they're like, read this and sign it. And I'm just like, okay, folks, sign it. And now I'm like, oh dear Jesus, what did I agree to? Did I give away my firstborn? Oh my God. Goodbye,
Beckett. The website does have a map, and it's interactive where you can drill down and go to your state and then your county or whatever health department, so you can look up what your state has. So I just wanted to share that it's a resource for you guys.
That's perfect.
Yeah, we'll link that for listeners.
Yeah,
or by me, I mean Jamie.
Just go to your county or state health department and Google it, and you'll be able to drill down and talk to them about what their requirements are and tolerances. So it'll help.
Okay, I was trying to Google it, but I'm going to use your map because that seems a little bit even better.
It does seem easier because I tried Googling it and I couldn't find out anything. Now, next step, Kathi, go ahead and create a dollar store meth tester. Okay. That's your next step. Get on that. We'll let everybody.
It's like I almost don't even want to know because I feel like so many places are gonna have it. Like it's like,
I mean, fuck, if
it's stressful to think about how bad it actually is.
And again, it's kind of that same thing with asbestos and lead. I mean, how long ago did we stop using lead paint?
I mean, it was
Seven-
recent.
70s, I
Yeah.
think, 70s.
Right.
But, you know, when I grew up, we weren't supposed to talk to strangers. And, you know, now in these environments that we have with Airbnb, VRBOs, all this kind of stuff, you know, we invite people to sleep in our beds, and we just really don't have a process of truly protecting. You know, we built a huge industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I've used it myself, but you just never, you know, it's a leap of faith. And so I'm just asking people to weigh their risk tolerances over the financial benefit and just understand the risk and the rewards and go into it with your eyes wide open. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, Kathi, thank you. Thank you so much for
Mm.
sharing this space with us and our audience, and just educating us further on how to protect ourselves. I mean, that means so much that you would take your time to do this, and that it means a lot for you to educate us. So I'm
Well,
grateful.
thank you for taking the time to have me here this evening. I appreciate it, ladies.
Yes. Thanks, Kathi.
We're gonna give our traditional send off, but Kathi, don't leave us quite just yet. So
Okay.
thank
Okay.
you guys so much for being a part of us and hearing Kathi's story, and we appreciate you now, forever, always. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We
We're
love you
here every Wednesday.
every Wednesday. Bye.
Bye.
If you think we're cool,
Or even if you don't,
please like or subscribe so you'll stay up to date on all things The Shrink Show.
thank you for choosing to spend a portion of your life with us. And remember, don't take yourself too seriously. Life is all a giant shrink show.
A Huda Media Production.
Side effects of listening to this podcast may include side aches or snorting from laughter, impromptu jazz hands, nodding in agreement even though you might be listening alone, an occasional "you said it, girl," and mild cases of existential dread. This podcast is strictly for entertainment and informative purposes only, and is not intended or implied to diagnose, treat, or otherwise substitute for professional mental health, medical, legal, or other advice. Thank you.